Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Surrounding Circle of the Mind, a podcast where we explore the powerful relationship between our environments, our biology, and our overall well being. I'm your host, and I'm glad you're here for another conversation that asks us to think a little more deeply, not only about individuals, but also about the environments that shape their lives. Today, we're talking about something that often goes unnoticed, yet affects every single one of us every day: the relationship between our physical environment, our health, and our overall quality of life. More specifically, I'll be focusing on my very own community, Baltimore, Maryland, especially Northeast Baltimore, and asking one important question: how does where we live influence how we live? At first, that sounds like a simple question, but the more we think about it, the more layered the question becomes. Where we live influences the air we breathe, it influences the food we have access to, it influences our stress levels, it influences our opportunities, and over time, it even influences our health outcomes. As social workers, we often focus on helping people manage emotional distress, trauma, family challenges, or economic hardships. But what if some of those struggles begin before a client ever enters our office? What if some of those challenges are connected to the environment they live in every single day? That's what today's conversation is about. Why environment matters? When most people hear the word environment, they immediately think of nature, trees, oceans, weather, or climate control. And while those things absolutely matter, social work asks us to think about environment in a much broader way. Environment also includes our homes, our neighborhoods, our schools, our transportation systems, our school food systems, and our access to safety and opportunity. In social work, we often use the phrase person in environment. That phrase reminds us that people do not live in isolation. People live within systems, and those systems shape how people function. They shape health, they shape behavior, they shape opportunity. This means we cannot fully understand a person's challenges without understanding their surroundings. To understand that connection, we first need to understand how environment affects the human body. Many people think biology is mostly determined by genetics. And yes, genes matter. But biology is not fixed. Biology responds, it adapts, it reacts to the environment consistently. Ferguson and colleagues explained that things in a person's environment, such as pollution, unsafe housing, neighborhood conditions, and exposure to toxins, can have a real impact on their health and development over time. That means our surroundings literally shape our bodies. Let's look at one example that has been a major issue in Baltimore: lead exposure. Baltimore has one of the oldest housing stocks in the country. Many row homes were built before lead regulations were established. That means some families, especially families in low income neighborhoods, still face the risk of lead exposure through peeling paint or contaminated dust. And that matters because lead is not just harmful, it is neurologically damaging. It affects brain development. It disrupts the pathway responsible for learning, attention, memory, and emotional regulation. That means when a child struggles in school or shows behavioral concerns, we should not immediately assume it is only a classroom issue. Sometimes it's an environment issue. Ferguson and colleagues also point out that when children are exposed to harmful environmental conditions early in life, it can affect how they learn, think, and behave later on, which is why clear support is so important. That changes how we think about intervention. Now, let's talk about air quality. Many neighborhoods in Baltimore are located near highways, industrial zones, or areas with heavy traffic. That means repeated exposure to pollutants, and over time, that exposure can contribute to asthma, respiratory illnesses, cardiovascular diseases, and chronic inflammation. Children are especially vulnerable because their lungs are still developing. Their immune systems are still developing, which means repeated environmental exposure creates long-term risk. And then there is food access. Some communities in Baltimore still experience what many describe as food deserts, or more accurately, food apartheid. Imagine wanting healthy food, but the closest grocery store is miles away. Now imagine not having reliable transportation. Now imagine working two jobs. Suddenly, healthy eating becomes less about choice and more about access. This is an environmental issue, and biologically, it matters. Poor nutrition contributes to obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, and chronic illness. So when we talk about biology, we cannot separate it from environment. They are connected, always. Now we're going to shift to ecological conditions and human behaviors. And while those physical effects are serious, environmental influences does not stop with the body. It also shapes emotions. It shapes behavior, it shapes relationships, it shapes how families function. To better understand this, let's imagine a child growing up in a northeast Baltimore home. They may be living in an older home with peeling paint. Their neighborhood may lack green spaces. Fresh food may be difficult to access. Their family may worry about paying utilities. Traffic pollution may worsen their asthma. Community violence may create daily stress. Now imagine that same child walking into school. They may seem distracted. They may seem tired. They may appear emotionally overwhelmed. Maybe they act out. A traditional lens might ask, what is wrong with this child? But a social worker lens asks, what has this child been exposed to? That difference matters. Environmental stress activates the body's stress response. When that happens repeatedly, the body produces cortisol, our primary stress hormone. Short-term stress helps us to survive, but long-term stress harms us. Over time, chronic stress can contribute to depression, anxiety, sleep disruption, heart disease, and weakening immunity. This is often called toxic stress, and many families experience it every day. This helps us understand why social workers cannot simply ask what is wrong. We also have to ask what is happening around the client, because environment shapes emotional health too. Once we recognize how strongly environmental conditions shape clients' outcomes, the next question becomes, what can social workers do about it? And the answer is simple. We must widen our lens. First, we must broaden assessment. Not just, how are you feeling? But also ask, is your housing safe? Do you have access to healthy food? Is transportation affecting your health care? Is neighborhood stress affecting your family? Those are not extra questions. They are essential questions. Second, we connect clients to resources. That may include housing support, food programs, utility assistance, medical care, or agencies like the Baltimore City Health Department. Sometimes solving a mental health concern starts with solving a housing concern. That is a deeper social work. Third, we collaborate. Environmental challenges are too large for one profession. That means working alongside schools, medical providers, community leaders, urban planners, and public health professionals. Because environmental challenges are community problems and they require community solutions. But there's another important question we have to ask. Do environmental problems affect everyone equally? The short answer is no. And that brings us to environmental justice. Mason and colleagues explain environmental justice as making sure every community is protected from environmental harm and has fair access to healthy and safe resources. Unfortunately, history tells us that that has not always happened. Baltimore is a clear example. Historic redlining shaped where families could live. It shaped who received investment. It shaped where highways were built. It shaped which neighborhoods received parks and which did not. Those decisions still affect communities today. Mason and colleagues also discuss how marginalized communities often deal with more environmental risk, especially when they are already affected by racism, poverty, and unequal access to resources. That means environmental injustice is not random. It is structural. It is systemic. And because systemic requires systemic solutions, that means environmental injustice is not just about where pollution exists. It is also about who carries the burden of that pollution and why. That is why environmental justice is social work. Understanding injustice is also important, but awareness alone does not create change. Action does. This is where eco-social work becomes essential. Renoff and colleagues argue that social workers need to take a stronger role in environmental advocacy because environmental and climate-related issues often hurt vulnerable communities the most. That advocacy can happen at many levels. At an individual level, helping one family secure safer housing. At a neighborhood level, supporting community cleanup efforts or food programs. At a policy level, advocating for lead removals, safer housing, more green spaces, and stronger climate resilient efforts. Renoff and colleagues explain that this work cannot be done by social workers alone. It requires working with different systems and professionals to protect both people and the environment. That means advocacy may happen in a counseling office, at a community meeting, or even at a policy table. No matter where it happens, the goal stays the same, creating healthier environments so people can live healthier lives. As we close today's episode, I want to leave you with one final thought. If social work is truly about dignity, justice, and human well-being, then our work cannot stop at the therapy office door. It must extend into neighborhoods, into housing systems, into environmental policies, into public health, because someone's lives should never determine whether they simply survive or whether they truly thrive. The places we live shape the lives we live. And when we improve environments, we improve lives. That is prevention. That is justice. That is social work. Thank you for joining me for episode 2 of Surrounding Circle of the Mind. Until next time, take care of your mind, your body, and your community.